The key scraped in the lock, a familiar sound that usually meant peace. Tonight, it was the overture to a circus I hadn't bought a ticket for. Surprise! The shout nearly knocked me back onto the porch I'd just stepped off. My own living room, a space I'd painted in calming blues and grays, was a riot of pink and silver. Balloons shaped like engagement rings bobbed against the ceiling. A banner screamed, "Congratulations, Tessa and Malik! My name is Naomi, by the way." And today, the day of this glittering ambush, was my 40th birthday. My mother, Jacqueline, rushed forward, her face a mask of ecstatic hostess. "Naomi, darling, you're here. We were worried you'd be late." She air-kissed me, her perfume, the expensive kind Tessa always borrowed, enveloping me. "Late for what?" I managed, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. My gaze swept the room. My sister Tessa was preening under the hideous banner, her hand theatrically placed on her new fiancé Malik's chest, showcasing a diamond that could probably blind a passing motorist. My father, Dale, hovered near the snacks, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him. It was his default state. "For the party, silly!" Tessa chirped, detaching herself from Malik to bestow a hug that felt more like a branding. "Isn't it amazing? Mom outdid herself." "It's a lot," I said, my eyes landing on a 3-tiered cake adorned with a plastic bride and groom. My birthday, my 40th. There wasn't so much as a stray "Happy Birthday, Naomi" balloon. Jacqueline beamed, patting my arm. "Well, with Tessa and Malik's wonderful news and your big day, we just combined things, sweetie. 2 big milestones, 1 fantastic celebration." Her smile was bright, unwavering, and utterly dismissive. Combined. Right. My 4 decades on this earth, a mere footnote to Tessa's engagement. I felt a familiar coldness settle in my chest. This wasn't new. My first heartbreak at 16? Tessa had just won a local talent show, so we didn't want to bring down the mood. My college graduation? Tessa had a really important school play rehearsal. My promotion to senior manager last year? Tessa needed help moving into her new apartment, the one I co-signed for because her credit was shot after that little misunderstanding with a department store card. "Right," I said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "Of course. Congratulations, Tessa. Malik." Malik, to his credit, looked a little sheepish. "Thanks, Naomi, and, happy birthday." He was new to this family dynamic. He'd learn, or he'd run. The evening unfolded as a tribute to Tessa. Toasts were made, all centering around her fairy tale romance, and Malik's apparent good fortune in snagging her. Jacqueline recounted an embellished story of Tessa's precocious charm as a child, conveniently forgetting the time that same charm involved Tessa accidentally setting fire to my prize-winning science project. Dale mumbled something about "both my girls" before trailing off, his gaze fixed on a wilting canapé. I circulated, a ghost at my own feast. I refilled drinks from the bottles I'd bought. I smiled when people, mostly Tessa's friends, gushed about the surprise. My house, the one I'd poured every spare cent and countless weekends into renovating, was merely the backdrop for their adulation of my sister. The down payment had come from years of scrimping, working overtime, saying no to vacations, while Tessa flitted from one expensive hobby to another, always with Jacqueline's enthusiastic and often my financial backing. "Naomi, sweetie, could you grab some more napkins?" Jacqueline called out, mid-anecdote about Tessa's first word being diamond. It was mine, actually. "Sure, Mom," I said, my voice even. I walked to the kitchen, opened the utility drawer, and my fingers brushed against a small stack of envelopes, certified mail, one addressed to Jacqueline and Dale Wilcox, one to Miss Tessa Wilcox, one to Mr. Malik Martin, current guest at this address, all from Allen Brewer, LLB, my lawyer. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. They were so busy celebrating in my house, eating my food, toasting Tessa's future with champagne I paid for. They had no idea that as of 3 days ago, this house, my beautiful, hard-won house, was no longer mine. It belonged to a lovely young couple with 2 kids who'd fallen in love with the garden I'd nurtured. The sale was final. The funds were in an account only I could access. The party eventually wound down. Tessa and Malik left in a flurry of love yous and promises to call tomorrow to rehash every glorious detail. Jacqueline and Dale, who lived with me for the past 5 years since Dad's business venture went belly up, another crisis I'd quietly absorbed, began a half-hearted attempt to clear up. "Don't worry about it," I said, my voice softer than it had been all evening. "I'll sort it in the morning." Jacqueline kissed my cheek. "You're a good daughter, Naomi. Night, sweetie. Oh, and happy birthday again." An afterthought, delivered as she was already turning away. Dale just nodded, a tired, defeated look in his eyes. I waited until their bedroom doors clicked shut. The silence of the house wrapped around me, no longer peaceful, but charged. I walked through the debris of their celebration, the discarded napkins, the half-eaten cake, the deflating ring-shaped balloons. My eyes landed on the calendar still hanging by the phone, my birthday circled in red weeks ago, a hopeful, foolish gesture. I went upstairs to my own room, the one room that still felt entirely mine. I didn't bother turning on the light. I just stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The mail arrives on Monday. Happy birthday to me. The Sunday morning after the party dawned gray and damp, mirroring my mood, if anyone had bothered to notice. Downstairs, however, was a different story. The air in the kitchen was thick with the smell of burnt toast and giddy triumph. "And then Malik said," Tessa was recounting, her voice high-pitched with excitement, "that he knew from the moment he saw me, I was the one." She giggled, stirring sugar into her coffee with such vigor, I was surprised the mug didn't shatter. Jacqueline sighed dramatically, hand to her chest. "Oh, it was just like a movie. Your father and I never had a proposal that grand." She shot a pointed look at Dale, who was engrossed in the sports section, or pretending to be. "Morning," I said, pouring myself a coffee. The silence that followed was brief, but noticeable. "Oh, Naomi, did you sleep well, dear?" Jacqueline asked, her attention already drifting back to Tessa. "Like a log," I replied, taking a sip. It wasn't entirely a lie. The decision once made had brought a strange sort of peace. Tessa beamed at me. "Wasn't last night just perfect? I still can't believe it." "It was certainly memorable," I agreed. Dale finally lowered his paper. "Right. Well, happy birthday for yesterday, Naomi." He offered a small, awkward smile. "Thanks, Dad," I said. The effort seemed to exhaust him, and he retreated behind the newsprint. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. "Alan, all confirmed. Documents dispatched as per instruction." I typed back a quick, "Excellent. Thank you." "Who's that, sweetie?" Jacqueline asked, her radar for anything not Tessa-related surprisingly sharp this morning. "Just work," I said smoothly. "A few loose ends before Monday." Tessa launched into a detailed plan for her engagement party, the real one, she emphasized, as if last night's ambush in my house hadn't counted. It would be at a terribly chic new venue downtown, with a guest list that sounded like a who's who of people I'd never met. I listened, nodding occasionally, my mind on the certified letters making their way through the postal system. Later, while Jacqueline and Tessa were engrossed in bridal magazines, their voices a low, conspiratorial hum, I slipped out to the garden. The air was cooler here, the scent of damp earth calming. My phone rang. "Quinn." "Hey," I answered, keeping my voice low. "You psychic?" "Just checking in on the birthday girl. So did the earth shatter? Did they spontaneously combust from the sheer audacity?" Quinn's voice was laced with her usual dry humor. She was the only one who knew the full extent of the plan, the only one I'd trusted. "Not yet. The main event is scheduled for tomorrow's mail delivery," I said, watching a robin peck at the lawn. "Last night was peak Wilcox. My 40th was apparently the perfect appetizer for Tessa's engagement announcement. Quinn groaned. No, they didn't. Oh, they did. Full banner, ring-shaped balloons, the works, in my house. Naomi, I swear you have the patience of a saint, or you did. The sainthood's been officially revoked, I said. Remember that small loan I gave Mom and Dad a few years back? The one for Dad's can't-miss investment? The one that conveniently vanished along with the investor? Quinn recalled. Yeah, what about it? That wasn't for Dad, I said, the memory still raw. It had been 5 years ago. I'd just received a decent bonus, the first real lump sum I'd managed to save after years of chipping away at student loans. Loans I'd taken out because my college fund had mysteriously evaporated around the time Tessa decided she needed a vintage convertible for her 18th birthday. Jacqueline had come to me, tears in her eyes. It's Tessa, darling. She's gotten herself into a bit of a scrape. A scrape that involved maxed-out credit cards, funding a lavish trip to Ibiza with friends, followed by an inability to pay her rent on the trendy apartment Jacqueline had insisted she needed for her image. The landlord was threatening eviction, Jacqueline had wailed, and your father and I, well, our hands are tied. My bonus, nearly $10,000, had disappeared into the Wilcox Family Crisis Fund, also known as Tessa's black hole of irresponsibility. There was no thank you, just a relieved sigh from Jacqueline and a breezy, "You're a lifesaver, sis," from Tessa, before she'd immediately started planning her next shopping spree. I never saw a penny of it back. It was just expected. They used it to bail Tessa out of some massive debt she'd run up, I told Quinn. Never told me the truth. Just let me think Dad had made another bad business decision. Unbelievable, Quinn breathed. No, wait. Totally believable knowing them. So this house thing is just the cherry on top of a very rotten cake. Exactly, I said. Consider it karmic interest. We talked for a few more minutes, Quinn offering unwavering support, and a promise to be on standby with emergency wine if needed. After we hung up, I pulled up the tracking app on my phone. 3 identical entries. Package accepted at USPS Origin Facility. Expected delivery, Monday. I stared at the screen. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, the carefully constructed facade of our family, the one where I was the eternally accommodating, endlessly forgiving backbone, would crumble. Tomorrow, the charade ends. A small, cold knot of anticipation tightened in my stomach. Monday morning. I was out of the house before the sun had fully committed to the sky, a travel mug of coffee in hand. The usual Monday morning dread was replaced by a thrumming, nervous energy. I'd left a note on the counter. Early meeting, back late, N. Vague, but enough. The drive to work was a blur. I replayed scenarios in my head, their voices, their expressions. I tried to focus on the quarterly reports I was meant to be reviewing, but the words swam before my eyes. Around 9:30 a.m., my work phone, the one I usually kept on silent during meetings, buzzed. It was Jacqueline. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again, and again. On the 4th try, I excused myself from my, thankfully understanding, team lead and stepped into the hallway. Mom, I'm in the middle of something. What's up? I tried to sound harried, impatient. Naomi, thank goodness. There's been some sort of mistake, a very upsetting one. Jacqueline's voice was tight, strained. We got this letter. It looks official. Something about, well, it's ridiculous, frankly. A letter? What kind of letter? I feigned confusion, picturing her standing in the kitchen, the crisp white envelope in her hand, her brow furrowed. I don't know. It says we have to leave the house. Can you imagine? Some dreadful scam, obviously. They're trying to scare us. Leave the house? That doesn't make any sense, Mom. Who is it from? I kept my tone even, helpful. It just says, occupant. It's addressed to me and your father. I haven't opened Tessa's yet. It just arrived, too. She's on her way over, absolutely frantic. She got one as well. Even Malik got one. Can you believe the nerve? Malik, too? That's bizarre. I let a note of concern creep into my voice. Look, Mom, I'm swamped right now. Can you maybe call the bank? See if they know anything about it? It sounds like some kind of phishing thing. The bank! Yes, good idea, darling. I knew you'd know what to do. This is just awful. My nerves are shot. I'm sure it's nothing, Mom. Just a nasty prank. I'll look at it when I get home tonight, okay? Oh, would you? Thank you, sweetie. You always know how to sort these messes. The relief in her voice was palpable. She still saw me as her reliable fixer. Good. I hung up, a cold smile playing on my lips. Phase 1 of their panic, confusion and denial. Perfect. I managed to get through the next couple of hours, a knot of anticipation tightening in my gut. I imagined the phone calls between Jacqueline and Tessa, their rising agitation as the bank, inevitably, would profess no knowledge of such a letter. I pictured them trying to call the number on the generic occupant letterhead, probably getting a disconnected line or some bewildered third-party mailing service. Just before lunch, my phone rang again. This time, Jacqueline's voice was no longer just strained. It was shrill, bordering on hysterical. Naomi, Naomi, you have to come home, right now. Mom, what's wrong? Did you talk to the bank? I kept my voice calm, a stark contrast to hers. The bank knows nothing. This isn't a scam, Naomi. I opened the letter properly, the one addressed to me and your father. I read the fine print. Her voice cracked. It's from a lawyer. Your lawyer, Naomi, Alan Brewer. It says the house is sold. It says we have 30 days to vacate. What have you done? What in God's name have you done? I could hear Tessa wailing in the background, a high-pitched keening sound. The charade was over. The bomb had detonated. Mom, I said, my voice dropping the pretense of ignorance, now cool and measured. I'll be home after work. We can discuss it then. After work? After work? Our lives are falling apart, and you say you'll be home after work? Yes, I said. I have a job, remember? The one that paid for the house. I'll see you this evening. I ended the call, her shriek cut off mid-syllable. I walked back into my office, sat down at my desk, and took a long, slow breath. The storm had well and truly hit land, and I was ready for it. The silence in my car on the drive home was a stark contrast to the cacophony I knew awaited me. I pulled into the driveway, noting Tessa's little red convertible parked haphazardly on the curb, half blocking a neighbor's access. Some things never changed. I unlocked the front door and stepped into an atmosphere so thick with tension you could have spread it on toast. Jacqueline, Dale, Tessa, and a very pale-looking Malik were arranged in the living room like a firing squad. 3 identical eviction notices lay fanned out on the coffee table. There you are! Jacqueline's voice was a low hiss, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. How could you? Tessa jumped up, her fists clenched. You snake! This is insane! You can't do this to us! Malik just stared at me, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Dale, predictably, was slumped in his armchair, looking at his shoes as if they held the secrets of the universe. Please, everyone sit down, I said, my voice calm. I placed my bag on the floor and remained standing. I assume you've all read the notices. Read them? Tessa shrieked. Of course we've read them. They're illegal. You can't just kick your own family out onto the street. Actually, I said, I can. The house was, and is, solely in my name. I purchased it with my own money. I decided to sell it. It's perfectly legal. The new owners take possession in 30 days. Jacqueline let out a sob. But why, Naomi? Why would you do such a cruel thing, after everything we've done for you? I almost laughed. Everything you've done for me, or everything I've done for you? Let's be clear. I bought this house. I paid the mortgage. I paid the bills. I paid for the renovations. And what did I get in return? We're your family, Jacqueline cried, reaching for a tissue. A family, I continued, my voice hardening, that threw a surprise engagement party for my sister on my 40th birthday, in my house, with my food, without so much as a card for me. Tessa scoffed. Oh, here we go. You're just jealous. Jealous that I'm getting married and you're not. Jealous? I met her furious gaze. No, Tessa, I'm not jealous. I'm done. Done with being the family ATM. Done with my achievements being ignored while yours are put on a pedestal. Done with being taken for granted. I turned to Jacqueline. Remember when I got that promotion 2 years ago, Mom? The one that meant a significant pay raise? You barely acknowledged it because Tessa needed help planning her influencer trip to Bali, which, by the way, I ended up partly funding because her credit card was unexpectedly declined. Jacqueline flinched. That was different. Tessa was building her brand. And Dad, I said, my gaze shifting to him. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a sort of weary pain. Remember when your last business partner skipped town with all the investment money? Who bailed you out? Who made sure you still had a roof over your heads, even though it meant putting my own savings plans on hold for years? Dale opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had no answer. He never did. Malik cleared his throat. Naomi, surely there's some misunderstanding. This is extreme. Extreme? I looked at him. Is it extreme to want to live in your own home without feeling like an unpaid innkeeper and financier? Is it extreme to finally say enough is enough after decades of disrespect? But where are we supposed to go? Tessa wailed, her anger giving way to a theatrical display of despair. We have nowhere. You're making us homeless. You have 30 days, I stated, my voice devoid of sympathy. That's the legal requirement. I suggest you start looking. The rental market is quite competitive. Jacqueline stood up, her eyes blazing. You will regret this, Naomi. You'll be old and alone, and you'll wish you hadn't burned all your bridges. The only thing I regret, I said, my voice low but clear, is not doing this sooner. This bridge was on fire long before I struck the match. You all just enjoyed the warmth too much to notice the smoke. Tessa lunged forward. You'll regret this. We're family. I didn't flinch. Family wouldn't have thrown me a party for someone else on my 40th birthday in the house I paid for. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. The fight seemed to drain out of them, replaced by a stunned silence. The reality of the 30-day deadline, the undeniable fact that I wasn't backing down, began to sink in. Their faces, one by one, registered the cold, hard truth. Their free ride was over. The days that followed were a masterclass in desperation. Jacqueline swung wildly between tearful pleas and icy accusations. How can you be so heartless, Naomi, after all I've sacrificed for you girls? She'd weep one moment, then hiss the next. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing us suffer? Tessa's tactics were less varied, mostly centered around rage and entitlement. You owe us, she'd scream down the phone, because face-to-face confrontations clearly weren't yielding results. Malik's parents are going to think we're trash. This is humiliating. Malik, when I occasionally saw him, looked increasingly like a man trapped in a nightmare, his initial attempts at mediating having dissolved into a strained silence whenever Tessa launched into a tirade. Dale made one feeble attempt at an appeal. He found me in the kitchen one evening, where I was methodically packing my own books into boxes. Naomi, he began, his voice barely above a whisper, is there no room for negotiation? A little more time, perhaps? Your mother isn't well. She seemed perfectly fine when she was planning Tessa's engagement party in my honor, I replied, not looking up from my task. 30 days is the legal requirement, Dad, and frankly, it's generous. His shoulders slumped, and he shuffled away. They consulted a lawyer, of course. I knew they would. Jacqueline mentioned it triumphantly. We're getting legal advice, Naomi. You can't just throw us out like this. A few days later, the triumphant tone was gone. My lawyer, Alan, had been meticulous. The sale was ironclad. Their tenancy, such as it was, had no legal standing beyond the notice period. Then Jacqueline played her trump card, or so she thought. "I've called Audrey," she announced one afternoon, her voice laced with a smug certainty. "She's coming over tomorrow. She'll talk some sense into you. She always had a soft spot for you." Aunt Audrey, my mother's younger sister. I hadn't seen her in years, not since Grandma's funeral. She was a pragmatic, no-nonsense woman, and I remembered her being quietly observant. I wasn't sure what to expect. The next day, Aunt Audrey arrived. She greeted Jacqueline with a cool politeness, gave Dale a sympathetic nod, and then turned to me. "Naomi, it's been too long." Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, held no immediate judgment. Jacqueline immediately launched into her well-rehearsed victim narrative. "Audrey, you won't believe what she's doing, kicking her own family out, after everything. It's barbaric." Tessa, strategically positioned on the sofa looking forlorn, chimed in with sniffles. Aunt Audrey listened patiently, her gaze occasionally flickering towards me. When Jacqueline finally paused for breath, Audrey turned to me. "Naomi, your mother tells me you're selling the house and have asked them to leave. Is that correct?" "Yes, Aunt Audrey, it is," I replied calmly. "And your reasons?" I laid it out, simply and without melodrama. The years of being overlooked, the financial burdens, the constant expectation that I would provide, culminating in the birthday party debacle. I didn't raise my voice. I just stated the facts. Jacqueline kept trying to interrupt. "She's exaggerating! She's twisting things!" But Audrey held up a hand. "Let her speak, Jacqueline." When I finished, there was a long silence. Jacqueline looked expectantly at her sister, clearly anticipating a stern lecture directed at me. Aunt Audrey looked at Jacqueline, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she said, her voice quiet but firm, "Well, Jacqueline, you always did have a knack for making everything about Tessa. I remember when I got my first car, you cried for a week because Mother and Father didn't immediately buy you one too, even though you couldn't even drive yet." Jacqueline's jaw dropped. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It has to do with patterns, dear sister," Audrey said, her gaze unwavering. "You reap what you sow. You can't expect endless sunshine if you only plant weeds." She then turned to me. "Naomi, this is a drastic step. Are you sure it's what you want?" "I am," I said. "It's not what I wanted, perhaps, but it's what I need." Aunt Audrey nodded slowly. "Then I suppose there's nothing more to be said." She didn't condemn me. She didn't offer platitudes about families sticking together no matter what. She just accepted it. A tiny flicker of warmth, of external validation sparked within me. Someone, at least, saw the bigger picture. Jacqueline was aghast. "Audrey, are you taking her side?" "I'm not taking sides, Jacqueline," Audrey said, rising. "I'm merely observing a situation that seems to have been a long time in the making. Perhaps it's time for everyone to stand on their own 2 feet. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod before she left. The moment the door closed behind her, Tessa exploded. "Fine! Unbelievable! Even Aunt Audrey's been brainwashed by her. We'll see who needs who. But don't think this is over, Naomi. You'll pay for this humiliation." I just looked at her, a profound sense of calm settling over me. "The only payment being made, Tessa, is the one for my peace of mind, and it's long overdue." With only a week left on the eviction notice, the cracks in their united front began to widen into chasms. The hushed, anxious phone calls I overheard were no longer just about finding a new place. They were about blame. "If you hadn't insisted on that ridiculous designer kitchen 5 years ago, Dale, we'd have savings." Jacqueline's voice, sharp and accusatory, drifted from their bedroom one morning. "My kitchen?" Dale's usually muted tone rose in disbelief. "What about Tessa's emergency fund for her car? Or the 3 failed businesses you encouraged her to start?" Tessa, meanwhile, had apparently decided Malik was part of the problem. If your parents really cared, they'd help us. I heard her wail at him in the hallway. This is your fault too, for not being more successful. Malik's responses were becoming shorter, his tone flatter. He looked perpetually exhausted. Their attempts to find new accommodation were, as I'd anticipated, a disaster. Years of relying on my income to subsidize their lifestyle meant their concept of an affordable budget was wildly unrealistic. The few viewings they managed to secure were for places far smaller, far less glamorous than what they were used to. Each rejection, each reality check fueled more arguments. I continued packing my own belongings, a quiet observer of their unraveling. One evening, I was sorting through old paperwork in the study when I overheard a particularly revealing exchange from the living room. I just always assumed, Jacqueline was saying, her voice laced with a bewildered sort of grief, that this house would be ours, that Naomi would, well, that she'd always be here, to take care of things. She was supposed to, Tessa agreed, her voice sulky. It's not fair. She has all this money from the sale, and we have nothing. That was the moment I decided they needed to understand the full picture. The birthday party was the spark, yes, but the kindling had been laid for decades. It was time to show them the oldest, most rotten log at the bottom of the pile. I walked into the living room, a faded bank statement from nearly 20 years ago in my hand. Speaking of money, I said, my voice cutting through their lamentations. They all looked up, startled. What do you want now, Naomi? Jacqueline asked wearily. I want to talk about my education fund, I said. The one Grandma Eleanor left for me. $20,000, specifically earmarked for my university tuition or a down payment on a property. Jacqueline and Dale exchanged a quick, uneasy glance. Tessa just looked bored. What about it? Jacqueline asked, a little too casually. You went to university, didn't you? Yes, I did, I replied, with student loans I'm still paying off, because when it came time for tuition, that $20,000 was gone. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I found this statement a few months ago, tucked away in a box of old tax returns. It shows a withdrawal of the entire amount, and a few weeks later a deposit of a similar sum into an account I now know was used to purchase a certain vintage sports car for a certain newly licensed 18-year-old. I looked directly at Tessa. Her bored expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Guilt? Or just annoyance at being caught? Jacqueline paled. Now, Naomi, that's ancient history. There were circumstances. Circumstances? I pressed. The circumstance was that Tessa wanted a flashy car, and you decided her whim was more important than my future. You never told me. You let me believe Grandma's gift had been lost in some bad investment of Dad's. You let me struggle with debt for years, all while knowing you'd stolen from me. Dale finally spoke, his voice hoarse. He didn't look at me, but at the floor. It was a mistake, Naomi. Your mother thought. I thought Tessa deserved a nice thing, Jacqueline interjected, defensive now. You were always so sensible, Naomi. We knew you'd manage. Manage, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. Yes, I managed. I managed by working 2 jobs through university. I managed by living on instant noodles while Tessa was showing off her new car. I managed by putting my life on hold over and over to clean up your messes. I placed the old bank statement on the coffee table next to the eviction notices. This house, I said, my voice cold and steady, was bought with money I earned despite your betrayals, not because of any support from you. It was never truly ours to share. It was mine, and now it's gone. I looked at each of them in turn. Just like your time here. Dale visibly crumpled. He didn't try to defend Jacqueline or Tessa. He just looked utterly, irrevocably defeated. Jacqueline opened her mouth, then closed it, no doubt realizing there were no more excuses, no more deflections. Even Tessa was silent, staring at the damning piece of paper. Only a few days remained. The air in the house grew heavier with each passing hour. The 30th day arrived with the gray, unceremonious light of dawn. I was already up, coffee brewed, watching from the kitchen window as the moving truck I'd arranged rumbled to a stop at the curb. The bill for the truck and 3 months of a small storage unit was already set to be forwarded directly to Jacqueline, my final act of detached assistance. Chaos reigned inside. Despite 30 days' notice, they were spectacularly unprepared. Boxes, half-packed and overflowing, littered the hallway. Suitcases lay open on beds, clothes spilling out. The air was thick with recriminations and panic. "I can't find my jewelry box!" Tessa shrieked, rummaging frantically through a pile of scarves. "Naomi, did you pack my jewelry box?" "No, Tessa," I said, sipping my coffee. "I only packed my own belongings. Perhaps you should have started sooner." Jacqueline appeared, her face a mask of haggard desperation. "Naomi, please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Just a little more time. A week, even a few days. We haven't found a place yet." "The new owners arrived this afternoon to do a final walkthrough with their agent," I stated, my voice devoid of inflection. "The house needs to be empty and clean, as per the sale agreement. But where will we go?" Her eyes filled with tears, the genuine, terrified kind this time, not the manipulative ones I was so used to. For a fleeting second, a tiny, unwelcome pang of something almost like pity pricked at me. I squashed it. This was the consequence of their own actions, not mine. "That, mother, is no longer my concern," I said. Dale was a ghost, quietly moving a few pathetic-looking boxes towards the front door. He didn't speak, didn't meet my eye. He just looked broken, a man hollowed out by years of passivity and enabling. Malik was attempting to help Tessa, but his movements were stiff, his expression strained. He taped up a box labeled Tessa, Shoes, Fragile, with a distinct lack of enthusiasm. Their earlier arguments must have taken a toll. The movers, two burly men who looked like they'd seen it all, began efficiently loading the few items my family had managed to pack. Most of it was Tessa's, endless bags of clothes, makeup cases, and decorative trinkets. Jacqueline and Dale had surprisingly little, a testament to how much of their lives had been lived under my roof, using my things. Tessa, realizing the finality of the situation, had a full-blown meltdown on the front lawn. "You're a monster, Naomi, a cold-hearted, bitter shrew. You'll die alone, you know that? No one will ever love you." I watched her unmoved. "Perhaps," I said, "but I'll die in a house I own, surrounded by things I chose, not things I was expected to provide for others." Jacqueline made one last, desperate plea as the movers started on the larger furniture they hadn't managed to sell or give away. "We'll change, Naomi. I promise. We'll appreciate you. Just stop this." Her voice cracked, and she reached out a trembling hand. I stepped back, out of her reach. "It's too late for promises, Mom. You had 40 years of chances. This isn't about changing anymore. This is about consequences." I looked around the emptying living room, the ghosts of their entitlement fading with every item removed. You know, for years I thought this house was a burden. The mortgage, the upkeep, the constant demands. But I was wrong. They all looked at me, even Tessa pausing her tirade. "This house," I said, a slow, deliberate emphasis on each word, "was my cage. And by selling it, by getting you all out of it, you haven't just lost a place to live. You've set me free." The last box was loaded. The movers secured the truck. Dale climbed into Tessa's small car, squeezed beside a pile of bags. Jacqueline hesitated by the passenger door, looking back at the house, then at me, her face a mess of conflicting emotions. Malik got into the driver's seat, his jaw tight. He didn't even glance my way. Tessa threw one last venomous glare over her shoulder before ducking into the car. "You'll regret this," she spat. The car pulled away from the curb, its engine whining in protest at the load. I watched it go, watched it turn the corner and disappear. Silence. A profound, echoing silence descended. I stood in the doorway of my now nearly empty house. The scent of their perfume, their arguments, their expectations, it was all fading. "It's done," I whispered, the words barely audible even to myself. A weight I hadn't fully realized I'd been carrying for decades began to lift from my shoulders. It was a complex, heavy sensation, tinged with a strange, sharp relief. But what now? The question hung in the suddenly vast, quiet space. The key to my new apartment felt light in my hand. It was smaller than the house, much smaller, but every square inch was mine, chosen by me, for me. No shared spaces, no unspoken obligations, just clean lines and a view of the city skyline that made my breath catch. I'd spent the first few days after the movers left the old house in a haze of cleaning and finalizing details with the new owners, a pleasant young couple who seemed genuinely thrilled. Then I'd moved my own carefully curated boxes into this bright, airy space. Quinn came over with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses the evening I finally unpacked the last box. "To new beginnings," she toasted, her eyes sparkling, "and to the successful demolition of the Wilcox family entitlement complex." I laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound. It wasn't a demolition, more like a controlled eviction. "Potato, potato," Quinn grinned. "So, any word from the exiles?" "Aunt Audrey called," I said, swirling the champagne in my glass. Subtly, of course. Apparently, Jacqueline and Dale found a tiny 2-bedroom rental across town, the kind with paper-thin walls and a landlord who inspects weekly. Jacqueline is, and I quote Audrey, "finding the adjustment challenging." "I bet," Quinn snorted. "No Naomi to foot the bill for takeout when she can't be bothered to cook in a kitchen smaller than her old walk-in closet." "And Tessa and Malik?" I took a sip. Aunt Audrey mentioned Tessa called her crying a few days ago. Malik apparently suggested they postpone the wedding indefinitely. He cited needing to reevaluate things now that he's seen the family dynamics up close. Tessa naturally blames me for poisoning him. Quinn raised an eyebrow. Shocking. So, no remorse? No sudden epiphany about their own behavior? "None whatsoever," I confirmed. "According to Audrey, I'm still the villain of the piece. The ungrateful daughter, the jealous sister. They're apparently telling anyone who'll listen how I cruelly threw them to the wolves." "Let them," Quinn said, topping up our glasses. "Their narrative doesn't change your reality. You're free, Naomi. How does it feel?" I looked around my new living room. The sofa was smaller, but it was a color I loved, not a compromise. The art on the walls was mine, pieces I'd picked up over years, dreaming of a day I could display them without someone else's clutter overshadowing them. "It feels quiet," I said. "In a good way, like I can finally hear myself think." There was a pang, not of guilt, but of something akin to mourning for the family I wished I'd had, the one that existed only in greeting card sentiment. But it was a fleeting shadow, quickly chased away by the bright reality of my present. The price for this piece had been the severing of those toxic ties, and standing here in my own space, on my own terms, it felt like a bargain. "So, what's next for the free woman?" Quinn asked. I smiled. "Well, my 40th birthday was a bit of a bust, party-wise." "Understatement of the century," Quinn chuckled. "So I'm thinking of redoing it, just for me. I've always wanted to go to that little coastal town a few hours south, the one with the art galleries and the amazing seafood." "A solo trip? I love it." "Maybe," I mused, "or maybe I'll just spend a weekend here, with good books, good food I don't have to share, and the blissful sound of silence." I walked to the large window, looking out at the city lights twinkling to life. The point is, the choice is mine, every single bit of it. The eviction, the sale, the confrontations. They were the necessary surgery to remove a sickness that had plagued me for years. The scars would remain, a reminder of what was, but they wouldn't define my future. That future was now a blank canvas. "You know," I said, turning back to Quinn. For my 41st birthday, I'm planning a party for one. A genuine smile spread across my face. And it will be perfect.